Look, there's plenty of blame to go around when there's one thing. When Favre throws the overtime pick that's foolish, right? Or you lose on one play. Or when Harbaugh doesn't call a timeout and Billy Cundiff goes wide and you had a timeout in your pocket. Just crazy brain fart things where you can say this or that or Lamar or Harbaugh or Roman. Man, if there was ever a team F-up, a team... I'm not going to use the word choke, but Marlon Humphrey used it, and it's certainly going to be used for this team. And we talk about Andy Dalton or Marvin Lewis or, anyone who never climbs the mountain. I mean, the Kansas City Chiefs never climbed the mountain, right? How this happens, and then the waiting, and then what happens. And from Lamar's perspective, I mean, you're painting the sky as, more vivid purple in the future. Lamar got a lot better after the Chargers loss. I mean, I would think as bad as you and I feel about this, Lamar's going to have to walk with this for the next 51 weeks, right?
Right, and you hope, and at this point, I expect, quite frankly, because of what he's done to this point in his career and how we as a city have gotten to know him. We hear about his work ethic, his drive, his competitive nature. You have to think that this is going to be something that drives him and motivates him and pushes him to continue to improve. And why wouldn't he continue to improve at this point? That's not to say he's going to win the MVP every year. It's not to say the Ravens are going to go 14-2 and have a sparkling point differential and break all these records. I mean, that's the part of it that I think is you do have to acknowledge that it was set up so well, and that's where I don't really take issue with Marlon Humphrey saying they choked. The Ravens were the number one seed. They were the best team in the league, and they're not even playing championship weekend. That's a big deal, and that's not.
And they didn't come close to playing. I mean, that's the hardest part. The hardest part is they really didn't come close. I mean, when they came real close at 14-2, but then when the lights came on, they fell behind early, often, and went away. Where like the Chiefs said, all right, let's go. Here we go. Get on my back. Let's go play. Let's go make things happen. And, boy, yeah, everything. I mean, the energy of the crowd and the weather and the Saturday night, and we're ready to go. And, the place was mobbed and the city was lit. And everybody goes home with that, wakes up to that on a Sunday morning and, goes out and walks the dog or feeds the cat or, in my case, sits 10 hours in an emergency room and thinks about what Marlon Humphrey said late into the night and thinking about what John Harbaugh's thinking about this and Eric DeCosta saying, yeah, we'll wake up in March when free agency opens and we'll have a cap number and we'll have players here and players gone and free agents and we'll have all of that. But we're going to have to sit here and talk about this for a little while because this is something that unless you avenge this and soon and get to Tampa next year and make us stop talking about it, this one hurts. This is going to take a long time.
Well, and let's look at this in terms of just recent history. Let's go beyond Lamar and this just solely the 2019 team. 2016, what happened in Pittsburgh on Christmas Day? 2017, Week 17, with fourth down and Tyler Boyd knocking the Ravens out of the playoffs. Last year, as great as the end-of-season run was, there was the very pitiful performance against the Chargers in the playoffs, and Lamar struggling as mightily as he did over the first three quarters. I think that one, in hindsight, it's not as though that team was a Super Bowl favorite, anything like that, but are you seeing a pattern here, just how each season is coming to an end? I mean, excruciating in 2016, even more excruciating in 2017 because it was at home.
But you know what? We would have said that, if Joe Flacco went back to pass and overthrew Jacoby Jones or underthrew Jacoby Jones, or the safety would have taken a better angle on Jacoby Jones, silence, right? I mean, literally, everything about the organization would be everything about Eli Manning's, legacy is different, right? I mean, everything about Pete Carroll's legacy is different if he runs the ball. Everything about John Harbaugh and Jim Harbaugh's legacy is different, probably if Frank Gore runs the ball. It's always one play or one thing, but when you get your ass beat like they did on Saturday night, you really do start to fall into that level of where Peyton Manning was when he couldn't win games. I mean, that's never going to be Tom Brady's legacy to not win these games, right? Like, when you get that opportunity, that's just a fact.
Think about the Tuck rule, though. Think about the Tuck rule, his first run. You're right. I mean, and I think that's where you do have to have a little more of a big picture sense from the standpoint of as you start to move into the off season, you look at this and say, okay, here's what happened in the playoff loss. It was terrible. Played poorly in all phases. Special teams or penalties. Offense, we know what happened there. Defense couldn't stop the run. You just look at it all the way around and say, it was bad. But then you also look at the 16-game sample in the regular season, and you see how much good's there. That's where you trust and the Ravens as an organization don't do anything hasty because they shouldn't, because it works so beautifully for 16 games. And that's when you get into the mode of more so, okay, how do we tweak? How do we improve? What do we do to put ourselves in a position for this not to happen again? But it does come back to what you just said, how sometimes things happen. And, I mean, we talked so much this year, Nestor, about how great the Ravens were in taking care of the football, despite having this offense where you have the mesh point and the quarterback pulling out the handoff, and Lamar only threw 6 picks all year. I mean, they were so good at protecting the football. But then we saw over the last couple weeks, we saw it week 16 in Cleveland even, with a fumble that you really hadn't seen all year between Lamar and Mark Ingram at the mesh point. And, Gus Edwards had a couple fumbles at the end of the regular season. And
we had blocked punts, missed field goals. We had all of that, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was some stuff at the end of the season that not that was a harbinger of what was to come or foreshadowing necessarily, but I think it maybe spoke to some regression to the mean. We knew, as much as you and I joked about this, because we've done this a long time, we've seen this a long time, we knew the Ravens were going to lose a game again. It was just going to be a matter of whether it was going to be January, week 2 next year, week 4 next year, whatever it was,
And I said, and I've been saying for 3 months, the night they lose is the night they kick the ball around, and probably the night they didn't tackle well. I mean, going back to Jacksonville and playing in London 3 years ago when Brandon Williams isn't in there, that they were susceptible to that. And at any point, the Cleveland game, right? You go back to Cleveland and getting their ass kicked 3 months ago, that if some big fat back started running them over and they stopped tackling, and somehow a couple of guys, a tight end gets loose on Brandon Carr, or they get through the secondary, or somebody's not there quick enough, that's how they lose. They lose when they kick the ball around and when they stop tackling. And, they kick the ball around and they stop tackling. I mean, literally, kicking the ball around's enough, right? Like, that's a very difficult thing to overcome, and it's something, to your point, for 3 months they never had to overcome it because they didn't kick the ball around.
Right. I mean, there are different studies done on this kind of stuff. I mean, when you win the turnover battle, I can't remember if it's a +2 or it's just a +1, but when you win the turnover battle, and I think it might be a +2, you're somewhere in the neighborhood of you're winning at least 80% of the time. I mean, that's just the way it works. I mean, those turnovers, or when you go for a 4th and 1, which, by the way, Ravens stopped on 4th and 1 twice. They were 8 for 8 on the season in 4th and 1. So for people that are killing John Harbaugh about going for 4th and 1, they made it all year long. And that was a big reason why they were as dramatically successful as they were, that aggressive nature. It just didn't happen. It's the same way that the Cy Young Award winner can, have a clunker in the postseason. Now, people are going to point to that and say, well, your legacy is determined in October or January when you're talking about the NFL or the Stanley Cup playoffs or the NBA Finals, but you'll see some things that happen in those spots that you just don't see. I mean, how else do you explain Joe Flacco looking like Joe Montana for 4 weeks in January of 2013 when Joe Flacco never looked like that for any extended period of time in the rest of his career. And I'm not knocking Joe saying that. That's just the truth. I mean, there are certain individuals who rise up, or there's instances where Hall of Fame caliber players sink in January for whatever reason. I mean, it just happens, and that's not to say
only one guy wins every year, and it's usually Tom Brady, right? Like,
sure,
so I mean, look at the road that's littered behind Tom Brady of the Jake Delhommes, and just go through the names of guys that lost to Tom Brady in January, and all of those guys carry that around. Every losing Super Bowl quarterback, even when you get there, you're Stan Humphries or you're Tony Eason or you're whomever you are. If you're not Doug Williams, right? I mean, if you're not Joe Flacco and you're not perfect that day, and even when you're Joe Flacco, 7 years later you get your ass run out on a rail. I mean, that's just a fact, right?
Right, and think of some of the names in the AFC specifically. I mean, Phillip Rivers. How about an Andrew Luck for the time that I mean, you're talking about some guys that were some really special talents.
Cam Newton's probably never going to win one at this point, unless he does, right? I mean, Carson Palmer's and all those guys that, had opportunities to play big games in January, and they'll live with that. I mean, we talked to Rich Gannon, I mean, the guys that don't win, it sucks. It really sucks.
And and this is where I do want to offer a little bit of balance and a little bit of perspective. Go look at Peyton Manning's playoff record over his first 5 seasons. Now the legacy changed a bit as time went on. Go look at some other guys that ended up being players that were kind of known for being pretty good in January. Now, I mean, not that Drew Brees has this amazing January legacy, but go look at him. Look at his first couple shots in the playoffs.
You wonder why LeBron took his talents to Miami, or you take your talents somewhere else because you try to put yourself in the best position to win. And certainly D'Amato Pekka did that this year. Earl Thomas tried to do that this year in being here. The guys that sort of skated into this thing at the end, 5 guys on defense. I mean, I was talking to L.J. Ford. L.J. Ford's been everywhere. These guys get an opportunity. It's not lost on us what this opportunity represented, as I'm still sitting here wearing purple lights. But man, for these players, this is something that they're going to carry around every single place they go when they go home. By the way, Hollywood Brown, the place we were going to be partying, his sister worked at the Dave & Buster's. So I walked up to him after the game and I said, "Man, I was just in Fort Lauderdale. I heard your sister worked at Dave & Buster's where I was going to throw this gigantic party." And he's like, "Yeah, man, my sister worked." Talk about hometown, right? And they'll never have that. I mean, Lamar is not going to get a chance to win a Super Bowl in Miami for now, right? And I was talking to my wife in the middle. She's sick as a dog. She's like, "Hey, man, where's the next Super Bowl?" I'm like, "Well, Tampa's next year, so maybe some of our plans from this year can transfer to next year." I said, then after that, it's L.A., it's New Orleans, it's going to be Dallas, Houston, Vegas. It's going to be those places. It's going to be West Coast. So the disappointment for Lamar and Hollywood, I think, is even more so because it would have been a hometown thing for them, and that opportunity doesn't come as a 14-2 home seed with all the things on top. Luke, let's take a quick break, man. We have plenty of distress here, right? This is not going to be happy purple radio here this week, but you can find Luke. He will not be out in Owings Mills unless anything weird happens out there. We're going to have time to pick up the pieces and the free agents and what happened, and I don't know that we're going to go blow by blow, fumble by fumble, mistake by mistake, penalty by penalty through the divisional game. And as we sit around and wait for Tennessee and Kansas City to pick up the pieces here this week, we will be in Miami for Super Bowl 54 either way. Luke and I will be there all week in South Beach 2 weeks from now. I am very, very grateful for the thousands of people that literally reached to me about partying in Miami. I'm disappointed as you are. I'm glad that you're here, you're listening, you're viewing. I'm going to keep the purple rope lights out for at least a day or two to soak up my purple tears. Nasty at WNST.net finds me, Baltimore Positive. I'm back on the trail of making the city better with Don Moeller later in the week. Martin O'Malley's going to join us on Friday as well down at Fadley's in Lexington Market. Come on down, say hello. Going to talk about making the world a better place. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, WNST Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore sports.